And welcome back. Thank you for joining me on We Are Unique. And don't forget, if you want to be a guest on this show, please do email the studio at wau@europentv.com. And we're talking to Louise in the studio today. And thank you for joining me again, Louise. So we're talking about a little bit about your new national course, which you're going to be rolling out. So tell us more about that.
Right. How it came about was I realised that there were no reasonable adjustments or no services for adults who have either an average or above average IQ on the spectrum. And at the charity that I run, which is called LifeWorks Staffordshire, we provide a service for clients where we act as advocates. We also mentor them by giving them strategies that will work for them. And we do the social interpreting, which means we put things in a manner that suits the person. As part of my master's course, I did a child study of whether it actually made a difference to the person when using what we call, in short, a SIAM, a social interpreter advocate mentor. And we found that it did make quite a difference to that person in terms of reducing their anxiety, in making them feel more confident, and just generally helping them to be able to engage in a better manner than they would without support. So from the trials it came out very positive, so I thought that really we needed to develop something that could be rolled out nationally that would make a massive difference to people on the spectrum. So I approached Keele University Psychology Department and have been talking with Dr. Donna Berry about how this programme could be developed. I'm looking at writing the modules for the programme. The sort of modules that we're looking into will be one on autism. There will probably be one on ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and there may be one on Tourette syndrome. Besides that, we'll have a module on personal development, and there will be a module on the legislative framework. So it'll have things like the Care Act and the Equality Act, because as most people are aware, that really does affect the people who are on the spectrum very much. And then the last module will be on mentoring and advocacy. We may have additional modules for sort of, if you like, a pick and mix type, so people would have to choose so many modules. And I'm trying to set it at a university level, but at a certificate level, so that more people are able to access it. And I'm hoping, with it being a distance learning course, it means it doesn't matter where you live in the country, you would be able to enrol and become a student studying towards this course. And the reason why I decided to go down this route is because to have a national impact, you've got to have something that people right across the country can access. And also, it's got to be open to very many different fields. For example, care. So you might get somebody who's got an NVQ level 3 in care, thinking, oh yes, I'll do the SIAM certificate, university certificate, because that'll be useful for me in my job, and it's a good professional development that I could do. But equally, it could be for an assistant social worker, it could be for a teaching assistant, it could go into so many careers. You know, a hospital.
So how do you feel it's important for people to have this? Like people who are deaf, they have social interpretation. So how do you feel it's so important?
Well, it's so important because if you look at the legislation, you are supposed to be able to have a reasonable adjustment for your condition. And currently, there aren't any reasonable adjustments for the conditions of Asperger's or autistic spectrum conditions. But if they did a SIAM, then that allows the person to have a reasonable adjustment. And any appointments, for example, with the Department of Work and Pensions, if you've got somebody there, that's great. I've worked on the premise that if you were a deaf person, you would have a signer. If you are a person whose English isn't first language, then you're going to have an interpreter. And part of the triad of impairments shows that we have weaknesses in communication. And it can be different in different people. So I think that having a SIAM actually addresses one of the core issues of autism. And it's the same with ADHD, because people with ADHD often are very impulsive and won't sit and think about a question. They will give you a spur of a moment answer, which actually might not be correct. And again, for people with autism, trying to interpret a question and understand what somebody's actually asking you, because sometimes you've got to be able to read between the lines. And if you haven't got time to sit and process it, you might not come up with the right answer. And again, it goes on what knowledge the person actually holds. Is it wide enough to be able to give a considered answer? Or is it, do they have a very narrow viewpoint on a certain subject? And these things are going to become more and more important, especially when we look at what's happening in the benefit world. Universal credits is coming, and I think that's going to profoundly affect a lot of people with autism, because as they migrate over from the benefits they're on now onto universal credits, I think a lot of people will find it very difficult and will look at losing benefits, which is what's happening today with things like PIP and things like ESA, Employment Support Allowance, and personal independence payments. Often the assessors don't see or don't understand people with autistic spectrum conditions. They just don't recognise the subtleties, if you like, of the condition.
So you mentioned with the course there's going to be so many modules.
Yes.
How, with the modules, once they've done the modules, how long will it take them to complete the modules, and how long will the course last for?
Well, I'm assuming the course will be a year, an academic year. But if somebody needs to take longer to do it, that's fine, because the lovely thing about distance learning, you can do it at your own rate. If you've got a lot of things going on in your life, you can only do 2 modules a year, then that would be okay. But we're looking for it to be about a year, an academic year.
So at the end of that course, that person then, would they become a trained facilitator?
Yeah, they would be a SIAM, a social interpreter, advocate, mentor, with a certificate at university level. And that would be able to be used in schools, in colleges, universities, in professions like caring professions. It would be very good if you could have people at hospital who could act as an advocate. And as I say, people whose English isn't first language. But I'm hoping that this will work with people with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, because often those people, as I said before, are very impulsive and they think very quickly, as do a lot of people with autism. But they may not wait and process the information enough to be able to give a considered answer. And that, again, is where your advocate comes in, because they will say, well, hold on a moment. You haven't thought of X, Y, and Z, or you might need to think about the practicality of this. And also, not just about communication, but we help people to have strategies for life, for how to deal with going into a new situation, for how to deal with meeting new people. These are all areas where people on the spectrum find it very difficult. For example, somebody with Tourette's syndrome may find it very difficult to engage with a new person because they're worried or concerned about how the new person may view them. Because and that's again the same with people with ADHD and Asperger's, because sometimes people don't respond in the manner that you'd like them to respond, because all of a sudden you're wearing a label. And I'm not a fan of diagnosis. I think that we would be far better profiling a person so that we know where their strengths and weaknesses lie. And that's what we do at my charity. We do send people for a diagnosis if they want one, and that's their decision. And we would never say to somebody, oh, don't go for it. If they want a diagnosis, we will refer them on. But I actually think the better way is to have a profile, because a profile outlines where all your strengths and weaknesses lie, and then you can work on somebody's weaknesses to try and build them and get them to play to their strengths. And then that way you're going to help to improve the person's self-esteem and confidence, because often people who are on the autistic spectrum have very low self-esteem and have less confidence because of all the things that have happened to them in their life, because there's a large number of the populace on the autistic spectrum who get bullied at school. I've got over 560 clients at LifeWorks, and the vast majority of them tell me they've been bullied at some point. And nothing's been done about it, but they have been bullied.
So when are you hoping to have the course rolled out?
Well, it's about how long is a piece of string. I'm meeting shortly with the quality person from the university for psychology, and they're going to look at how I need to write it, because when you're writing a programme, you have to write it to their standards. So I've got to understand what their standards are. I have written university programmes before in my former life, if you like, and so I'm hoping to get it done.
Would it be expensive for people to enrol?
I'm not sure.
Will there be different rates if like parents or carers want to access it?
I don't know yet, because it'll be down to the university and what they charge. I'm hoping some of the money will come back to LifeWorks to help us to become sustainable, because trying to get funding in for charities, as you know, is very, very difficult. I'm also trying to work with combined healthcare, because they have a duty to ensure that when people go to use their services, that there are reasonable adjustments made. Even down to things like having a quiet room to sit in, you know, where you haven't got to sit with everybody else because you can't cope with it. You know, all sorts of little things. So I'm hoping that we can work with probably combined healthcare to actually trial the course. Because once we pilot the course, because obviously it'll be piloted first of all, to see how it goes and to improve it. And then hopefully it'll roll over. So I think it'll be about 18 months before it's properly rolled out. And then the price structure will be obviously in negotiation with whatever the university wants to charge. But I'm hoping that it does think about giving discounts to people who are carers or people who are on the spectrum.
And what about people overseas in different countries such as Europe? Would they able to access it? I'll
tell you the country that I'm looking at targeting. I've already spoken to Donna about this, is America. And the reason why I've chosen America is because when I was doing my masters, I looked at what advocacy they had over there, and I was thinking, oh, they have a lot of advocacy, it'll be really good. And there wasn't. The only advocacy I came across was parents advocating for their own children or young people. And I think that's what happens in this country. It's down to your parent or your carer to actually speak up for you on the terms. Whereas if you've got somebody who's doing it as a professional job, they're going to know more. They're going to know what to say, what to do. And I think it'll just help people on the spectrum so much. And I don't know why it's not been done before. I don't know why nobody else has thought of it, but they haven't. And so I'm hoping this is going to make a massive difference. And it isn't like you'd have to have a SIAM for life. You might only need a SIAM for 5 years, and then you may have enough strategies and enough confidence to be able to do what you need to do yourself. So, I mean, I'm hoping that it helps people to grow and gain new skills. But as I said before, sometimes when you're in a situation where you are very anxious, it is very, very difficult to think and to come out with the right answers. I'll give you a good example of that. I once went for an interview at a very large college, and the then principal said to me, how would I know when you are nervous? Because as an autistic person, I didn't show any nerves. So what did I do? I answered it very literally. I said, look, my palms are sweating. And I think he thought I was being, I wasn't taking it seriously. Well, I was, but I'd given a sort of knee-jerk reaction answer because I thought, how do I answer that? So I gave him a physical proof, but he thought I was being, I don't know, silly, for want of a better term. And in another job interview, this will make you laugh, this very pompous man asked me how would he remember me? And my answer was, I'm a Dawn French lookalike. And the psychiatrist that was sitting next to him, she fell about laughing because she thought it was a brilliant answer. But I just said what popped into my brain, and out it popped. And that was the sort of ADHD side of me popping out. No thought, no, and out it came. I didn't get either of those jobs, by the way, but in actual hindsight, I didn't want either of those jobs after being through the interviews. But yeah, so I do think the SIAM role will help people, because there's this misunderstanding that if you are seen as academic or bright, there's an assumption by society that you don't need any help, that you're okay, you can manage. And by having a SIAM, that's a visual message to them that, yes, actually, this person does need some support and help. I mean, I've actually gone into companies to support clients because their company they work for do not understand their condition. And they often end up telling the person off because of something they've done which is related to their condition. And I have to go and say, well, you can't beat the person over their own head with their own condition. Yeah. You've got to learn to understand it and the reason why they're doing what they're doing. And it can be something very simple.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Louise. Thank you for sharing the insight to this new national course which is rolling out. It's very interesting. So thank you for joining me on today's show, and thank you to all my guests today, Louise and Murdoch. And join me next month where we'll be talking more about autism and other related conditions on We Are Unique. Thank you.